Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
And we are honored today to have two former members of Congress. You guys were elected the same year?
2010.
2010.
Yep.
The
Republican
guys
wave.
of 2010. So Kevin Yoder from Kansas, he was the Kansas 3rd, and obviously Ben Quayle from a great state of Arizona.
Absolutely.
Great to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
Well, not only are they former congressmen, but we also have children together at camp.
Well, I don't.
Of all things.
Yeah, that's okay. You guys.
we do.
Yeah, for
Really?
2 weeks
Yeah,
now.
For 2 weeks, we've been childless for 2 weeks. It's been that's why I was able to come here.
Your youngest, my middle, his oldest.
That's right.
All in the same grade.
First time our daughter's ever been away for, overnight. So
Yeah.
it's been a little stressful.
First overnight.
First
And
overnight.
it's a 2 week
2 weeks.
camp.
in
How's,
Texas.
how's your wife
Wow.
doing with it?
She was actually pretty, emotional about it a little bit when, she did the goodbyes, but
I was emotional this year.
Yeah.
I have no idea why, but I just really was. I was like,
yeah,
because I have this great rhythm with my kids.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to
we're
Father's
excited
Day.
too to get him home.
Yeah.
But they'll be back by Father's Day.
They'll be back by Father's
Yep.
Day,
That's
and we're all going out to fetch them. Not that we'll see each other overall, because it's a mad dash.
Just where I want to spend my Father's Day on Southwest, flying from Austin to Phoenix.
Yes,
Hopefully, I can get the U.S. Open on the TV there.
exactly. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about this fair city and
Well,
what you guys do.
yeah, I mean, so you guys were of the fabled class of 2010. That's near and dear to my heart because I was very involved in that election from the outside. Didn't do much for you, but we did do some help for Kansas 3rd. So, tell us a little bit about what your perspective is of Congress now. You were there, you're gone, you're on the outside now. What's changed? What's good? What's bad? What do people need to know? I mean, to me, it just seems like if I had been a congressman, I would be glad that I wasn't there now. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, Kevin, you were more recent, so.
I mean, a lot of the former colleagues that I talk to are always like, boy, good thing you got out when you did. This place is miserable. I hear that word miserable a lot from folks. I think it's gotten a little bit better in some ways only just because the COVID restrictions added a whole nother layer. When Speaker Pelosi was in charge, they had metal detectors and, there's just a lot of
draconian.
Yeah, a lot of protocols, and they started doing proxy voting, right?
Yes.
So people weren't there at all. And, as I think we all know, one of the keys to a functional Congress is relationships. And if folks are at home, they're doing proxy voting and they're masked up and all that. So I do think that really escalated a lot of the tension. But it's tough right now for those guys and gals.
Yeah.
And especially when you have dysfunction within the Republican Party and the conference. I think it's gotten better. Johnson's got his sea legs. There's not a motion to vacate every other week. We'll see if Marjorie Taylor Greene does it again. But I'm hoping that they're actually passing appropriations bills with only Republican votes, which I'm shocked about. But let's see if they can still keep doing it.
So the promise of regular order is bearing a little bit of fruit that actually they might get there.
Yeah, I think
At least in the House.
There's a skeptical look.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons it's been choppy waters for the Republicans is because instead of just sort of coming down with some tablets from a mountaintop and saying this is going to be the product, they've worked the subcommittees and they've worked the full committees and they've had to go and talk to members because the margin's so small. They actually have to go and talk to each. There's a lot of the Senate's what they always say the 100 kings or whatever. The House has a little bit of that going on now because each 2 or 3 votes you have to have. So they've got to really work each bill to get it across the floor. And when they do so, they have a product at least that it's pretty unifying on the Republican side. Now
Right.
that meets the reality of a Democratic Senate and the process. But I think one of the reasons it feels somewhat challenging is because they're going through that and not just coming down from the top.
Yeah. No, they're actually working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that stuff, the appropriations process is in fact hard
I would
work.
imagine
It's
that's
not
new for a lot of them.
Yeah,
I mean, going
look,
through the process and actually having to own the process.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be clear. In previous years, the House has always been really functional on appropriations. They work the subcommittee, they work the full committee, and it goes across the floor. I just think that they've been able to run over people in doing that because of the margins. And now the difference is they're really having to iron out every wrinkle in the conference in order to get these bills passed.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not all of them can go to the floor because they have certain issues that are just unresolvable, and they're going to require a bipartisan solution. And they can't do that on the front end because they want to produce a committee bill that the majority supports.
Yeah, I mean, they'll get all 12 out of committee, more than likely, but I think that more contentious bills will not go to the floor.
There may
go
be
to
a
the floor.
couple. Last year, I think it was the CJS bill and the Labor H bills that didn't even come out of committee. You've got some issues there, like on the CJS bill, Commerce, Justice, and Science for your folks. That's got the Justice Department, right? So you have a real kind of divide in the Republican Party right now about defunding, the special prosecutor and some of those things that are hard to get, 218 Republicans on the same point on that one.
Yeah, because I think that a lot of people don't recognize that what you want to do right now, if it's not within the regular course of things, sets a precedent that may be used against you at a later date. And so if Republicans are saying, "Oh, we should defund these special prosecutors," well, that might come back and bite them in the ass.
Well, and it's this bill that they're wrestling with this week over whether a president who's facing criminal or civil cases can have that moved to federal court. Ben, I don't know if you're tracking that one, but that's one that I think the speaker's wrestling with. And I can't imagine they'd have 218 votes that would agree on that. But I think there's been other presidents that have been sued in state court.
Yeah, I would imagine. So.
Some of Bill Clinton's.
No, I mean, it's just using the normal
quite a
process.
few,
Like if there's a question of federal law, then you can remove it to federal court.
Right.
If there's a constitutional issue, you can remove it to federal court. I think.
This would essentially say if a president is sued, and
I don't know
that is one of the reasons it can be moved to federal court.
That can't get 218.
Yeah. So what kind of issues are motivating you guys in this day and age? What are you working on? What's interesting for our listeners? What do you want us to know?
Well, I mean, we're right now just focusing on what our clients' needs are, and making sure that some crazy bill or some crazy amendment doesn't get added to a must-pass piece of legislation. And right now, there's just always this blocking and tackling for us, and kind of navigating the different personalities on the Hill, especially since you got the populist wings of the Republican Party, the traditional conservatives, and then the right of center moderates, and then you have the same dynamic on the Democratic side. It's like you got the far left, you got the business friendly Democrats, and then the moderate ones that are in those districts. There's a lot. There's a lot of personalities up there.
Well, and there are a lot now. There were a lot more moderate kind of blue dog Democrats prior to you guys getting there, because a lot of you won seats that had those. There were a bunch that lost, and it is in part because Pelosi had kind of forced the healthcare vote on them, and things went badly. But there are even fewer moderate Democrats now than there were when you were there. That's my perception as I look at that. Is that true?
Yeah, I think the blue dog ranks have been pretty decimated. I want to say,
do they even call them blue dogs
there
anymore?
is a small group, I think, that's
There's
still
actually
involved.
some debate about
Yes,
whether
that's true. Good point. We're talking about changing the name.
somehow somebody didn't like it.
Yeah.
Then they got kicked out for being woke. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Problem Solvers Caucus was just bipartisan, but that kind of was a little contentious when they didn't come to Kevin McCarthy's aid and actually solve a problem.
Right.
And then the House went into chaos. I think that when we were even there was a ton more camaraderie on both sides of the aisle. You were friends. Now it seems, and this is perception, but people just hate each other. And I think part of it was like what Kevin said with COVID, you just weren't around because they wouldn't even vote at the same time. They would go in groups. So half the time you're interacting with all of the members is when you're sitting there in these long vote series. So you get to talk to them, get to talk about their families. They had to be in different groups. They had to stay 6 feet apart from one another. You had to be masked. And that's when I started seeing kind of the unraveling of the relationships across the aisle, especially on the House side.
That's really interesting. That's a good
Well,
point.
and when you were on our podcast earlier this year, we talked about another factor, and that is, people don't live here anymore. They're not raising their families here like they used to back in the day, and that has a dramatic effect on how people just see each other as people.
Yeah, I mean, earlier, 80s or
They don't
90s,
bring their families here
yeah,
to live.
Yeah, and that really became stigmatized, right? The idea that you had gone Washington, right? You were here, and your kids weren't in the schools back home, and so there are a handful of people that do it, but the large majority of folks fly back and forth. And probably for your listeners, I mean, the idea is essentially members will fly in right before the first vote of the week, which is always at 6:30, oftentimes on a Monday night. And they will cast that vote, and they'll be there all day Tuesday and all day Wednesday, and they will fly out Thursday morning or Thursday early afternoon. So, I mean, they're here less than 72 hours. And during that time, there are multiple committee hearings. There are floor votes a couple times a day. There are people are going to fundraisers and events, and there aren't actually a lot of bipartisan social activities in this town either.
Yeah.
And that's surprising to folks. Like, almost all the dinners are usually partisan, like you're getting together with your Republican friends or you're getting with your Democratic friends, or it's a fundraising dinner, and that is going to be partisan as well. So there just really aren't that many opportunities. And certainly when people lived here, they would be at barbecues on the weekends or people
Soccer games.
Yeah, soccer games. People talk about those days, and Ben experienced some of that firsthand probably. But so that changed, and then I think right when we got here in 2010, so it seems like just yesterday, but almost 14 years ago. It was right when, things had moved into the email era. It was moving into the social media era. Like, my predecessor never had a Facebook account, right? They never had those. It things funny now, but in the 2000s, they didn't have to deal with the social media communication style that exists now, which is obviously much more anonymous, much more vitriolic. And, I think even before that, there was a world without 24-hour cable news. So we have a scenario where you have 24-hour news cycle with breaking news nonstop, with people able to argue with strangers from around the world and basically sit in the comments of their members of Congress and spew hatred, and that sort of changes the way all that sort of bubbles up. And it's no secret that there's a big incentive now in Congress to be a media sensation.
Yes,
right, and that's
we call it clicks and coin.
Clicks and coin, right? Yeah. So probably another podcast out there like Light Beer, Dark Money.
Right.
But right, that is the world now, and every class has a few folks that come up that see the merit and value of getting themselves on TV, raising lots of money, and that's the reward system. And people at home always would say, gosh, we just want you guys to work together and solve problems, but that's not how they vote.
Yeah.
They are attracted to the candidates that say, I'm going to fight, and I'm going to oppose, and I'm going to stop. Not, I'm going to collaborate, listen, solve problems, work together across the aisle. That just doesn't really get the clicks or the media attention.
Yeah.
It sounds nice in a think tank, though.
It does, right? Yes, yes.
Well, what's good about that in some ways is that it's starting to be identified, at least. As
It's getting called out.
You mentioned one member of Congress. I mean, there's definitely members on both the left and the right who are the clicks and coin conference. That's all they're there for. They're not there to do anything else but get clicks and coin.
Yeah.
Just be on Fox News every night or MSNBC every night and raise as much money as they can.
Yeah.
It's being a complete, whatever.
Don't just build out your press office and don't touch policy.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You're not principled. You have no public policy prescription for anything. You're just there to be disruptive.
But it's recognized here, but I mean, it tends to still drive the clicks and coins. So, I mean, is there a point at which voters say, hey, I see what you're doing. That's not problem solving. That's not, the grandstanding isn't helping. It doesn't appear, though, that like the electorate is moving the other direction. They seem to be still in sort of enamored with that style of leadership.
It's a really interesting observation because it's, people want you guys, members of Congress, they want members of Congress to work together. They want to get things done, or so they say.
Yeah.
But you're right. They're voting just usually totally the opposite, which is.
And they would probably
Very
even
ironic.
agree in a poll. Would you rather have a member that grandstanded or a member that, was getting their head down that you didn't hear more about it? They would probably say overwhelmingly, I want that member that's working with their head down.
Right.
But ultimately, how would they ever know? Right?
Yeah.
And so they
Get all that free media.
yeah. And then that drives up all the, we used to sit in our offices and get, a cable news host or a radio host or, it's kind of more pre-podcast days, but someone would light up an issue and then our phones would light up.
Yep.
I mean, I remember my local office saying that they always knew when Rush Limbaugh's program was over because as soon as it was done, calls would start coming in.
Yeah.
Right? So in many ways, that's what drives people's engagement with their members of Congress too. So the people that are calling offices are not calling saying, please be nice.
Yeah.
They're calling saying, I'm mad at you for these reasons.
Yeah, it was Rush, and then it was Tucker after that.
Yeah, right.
And
And now it's, moved on to,
Right.
other versions of that. So
Well, what's interesting is that we're going off all kinds of tangents, but you look at the radio landscape. I mean, once Rush passed away and he was gone, I mean, there's been no replacement. So there's, in some ways, I view talk radio as a totally different animal now because it's so fragmented. And with the rise of podcasts, people are listening. They just got a lot more choices.
I think when we were coming in 2010, talk radio was still driving
Yes.
a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of the political discourse in this country. And you're right. I don't know that it is in the same way, certainly not in the same way, but now it's getting driven from other areas.
Yeah. Obviously Joe Rogan. There's some of the big, Megyn Kelly, others that have the big podcast platforms.
I think that's what it's same concept, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
less being pumped over AM airways and more, on.
Well,
Yeah,
in my
I
case,
would
because I drive a
imagine there's
Tesla,
certain
I don't even
podcasts
get.
that people listen to every day, and they act on those podcasts no matter what, whether it is a Megyn Kelly or even a Ben Shapiro and some of the stuff that he focuses on every single day, and it gets people riled up and gets people action oriented.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's actually great, right? Because what you want is people participating in democracy and listening and engaging. I think the challenge for elected members is that the folks that are engaged tend to be the ones who are most passionate and most partisan, right? And so people want to know why Washington doesn't get anything done, why there's all this gridlock, why there's all this fighting. It's like, to reiterate the point, because that's what you're telling them to do.
But and also some of these podcasters, they go for the confirmation bias, right? And then the listeners go, I knew it. I knew that's what they were up to. And then get on the phone and call, even if it's a complete fallacy.
Yeah. I wonder if we've been
That's
guilty of that.
I don't think we're guilty of that.
I don't know.
We try to we side on the intellectual honesty. I think.
I don't know. No? Sometimes I get a little bit off.
Maybe
the
you go a
rails.
little off when you.
I mean,
not too
I'm still
often.
of the belief that Biden is not going to be the Democrat nominee in
That's,
November. But,
and you and Ted Cruz are right in there together.
Yeah, we'll see after June 27th.
Yes, I
right?
think
June
that's
27th.
that will be a
why
very
a
big
June
marker.
27th debate date? Oh, I don't know.
I do like how the left has just gone bonkers over that one Wall Street Journal article.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, you can see with your own eyes that he's having some cognitive problems.
We talk about it every single show. We were talking about the whole Juneteenth celebration at the White House over the weekend, and our fair president was not there. He was there, but he wasn't there.
But
Sad state of affairs for our country.
The opinion page is totally different than the reporting page at the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal reporting is still left.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
So,
To be, I mean, for a news
Unfortunately
article, for a news article to do the deep dive, I mean, it was heavily reported. I mean, they did a lot of work on that, and obviously it took some time. But I just, the way that the left is, the Democrats are deflecting on this is just astounding to me. They're definitely not serving themselves.
No, not
I
at
don't
all.
think.
I don't think so either. But I mean, we'll see during the debate. It's either gonna, I think, give him a boost or.
And I guess it must be that, because he did overperform State of the Union,
Yeah.
right? We can all admit that because we all set the expectations so low. But it'll be very interesting to see how he does in a back and forth, unscripted type situation.
How many no cards is he going to be allowed to have?
Well, I mean, typically they don't allow him to have no
But
cards.
what would be the process by which this would unfold where he's not the nominee, right? So it would have to be his decision. There's not really a
Right.
way in which the convention is able, even think legally, to choose somebody else. So even if everyone else said, "Hey, it's time," if he doesn't believe it's time,
Well,
so
and that's
a sense that he would be giving up the race.
and that's the one caveat is that this guy has wanted to be president since he was a child.
Right.
So they're gonna have to, basically pry it from his cold dead fingers.
And there's nothing about the way his team's operating that gives any sort of inkling that they
Right.
are like cooling jets a bit or looking for a soft land. I mean, they are full steam
They're
ahead. Now
going
they
all
may
in.
have quiet reservations
Yeah.
or even serious reservations behind the scenes, but their front facing at least is like we're going all the way through.
Well, and one of the things that we've said in a previous episode is that they are doing it. I mean, I will give the White House credit that they are a vault. I mean, there are
Yeah.
no leaks out of that place because there's obviously plenty of things that could be said about Biden and his condition. We're hearing none of that.
Good point.
So that
But you are
doesn't-
starting to see cracks in the media that they're
Yeah.
just starting to do this like soft stories.
Well, and I think it must be if you're a press pool guy and you're watching this every day, at some point it's gonna be like, dudes, come on, man. I mean, something is up. I don't know. It just strikes me.
Well, I mean, you have to kind of think that the press kind of misses Donald Trump in some ways.
Well, they missed the
It's
ratings.
a codependent relationship. for sure.
Well, they missed the ratings and they missed the engagement. The guy, I give him credit. Just he was hungry for their questions and he was happy to give them plenty of colorful responses, and he was at least engaged. And when was the last time Biden actually did a press gaggle? You can't do them. They try to harbor him away. So he can't function as just a normal human being.
But leading up for Trump's team, they should be saying how great of a debater he is because he did do pretty well in those debates in 20, but they keep trying to keep the expectations low. Which
They are
doesn't make
definitely
any
going the
sense.
opposite direction as they should. I mean, you're right. You are absolutely
Isn't
right.
that the
They
goal in a
should be-
debate, though, to have your expectations be low so you overperform?
Well, that's what. But they're pushing the Biden expectations.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
Trump's,
sorry.
Trump's
Yeah.
like Trump's people are like he can't even put two sentences
yeah,
together.
that's
You
a
should be
mistake.
saying, look at him in 2020. He's a skilled debater. He's been here for 30, 40 years. He
He'll
should be
come
wiping
prepared.
the floor with me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
prepared.
he is a professional debater. I mean, he's been in the Senate he was in the Senate for, like you said, 40
Yeah.
years. I mean, that's what they do.
And that is a real risk for this debate for the Trump team, right? Is that just like the State of the Union, where everyone was worried whether he could even, get to the podium and complete a sentence, and then they're like, wow, that was actually better, even though it was probably below anyone else's State of the Union. They were like, that was actually not bad, right? Because of the
Right.
expectation. Same thing can happen in this debate, where he comes out and
It just depends.
Trump
when
doesn't get the
drugs-
knockout blow. Biden overperforms. He's amped up, and they're like, Biden. Even
back.
though he's back, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
he's like, he can carry some of that momentum. That's the
Just
risk here.
depends when the drugs wear off.
Well, there you go.
Well, and I mean, you think about the
And
timing
that's
of this.
Trump. That's what we talked about in a previous podcast. That's where Trump needs to be disciplined, much more so than he was in the previous debates. Is let Biden talk. Let him let the drugs wear off.
Well,
And then-
it's
and
not
then see
just
what
that.
happens.
It's that Biden will say stupid things.
Yes.
With or without cognitive issues.
Because he'll start ad-libbing and just throwing
Yes,
stuff.
and-
Like he did in the
and-
State of the Union even, where he's like
Exactly.
going off script on a scripted speech.
Yes.
And he said his uncle was eaten by cannibals.
He said it the other day at
Exactly.
D-Day. He said, I don't want to get personal here, but he started talking about Uncle Opie or whatever his name is, who got eaten by cannibals.
Yeah. I mean,
We're still trying to verify, is my understanding.
well, I think we all know.
So the
Well,
interesting-
no, didn't the government of
Yeah, they pushed
Yeah,
it over.
they pushed back and said,
literally
this is
said
a complete lie.
that is not true.
they're probably
No, I'm
insulted,
being
frankly,
facetious.
by the whole
yeah.
comment.
And we said
The
it.
Board of Tourism was like, we do not have cannibals.
And he went off and plagiarized Ronald Reagan yet again.
Well,
So
yeah.
there you go.
So, the interesting thing, to change subject slightly, about sort of these races is you asked earlier kind of what we're focused on and
Sure.
what we're really stressing on is, it's June. Congress is in a few more weeks this summer. Then they're out all of August. They're out all of October. They'll be in a few weeks in September. They're going to have some deadlines. There's always the, end of the fiscal year, as folks know, September 30th. But essentially, we're kind of moving into let's get prepped for next year mode, right? and Democrats think they're going to win the House. They think, these things. Republicans think Trump's going to win. We definitely think the Senate's going to go Republican. The House is an interesting sort of conversation here, but that sort of dynamic has a huge impact on what gets accomplished this year. Because after the election, we got a lame duck Congress, and if it's the same, players on the field, or if it's totally different, that totally changes what happens this year, what we're anticipating. And there's a real interesting. We talked about appropriations earlier. There's a real interesting push from the Trump team or folks in that orbit to say, punt it all to January. Let us have it. We want all these issues, but it's kind of one of those realities of does the Trump administration really want to start knee deep in debt ceiling, a perp shutdown, all those sort of tough. They already have the tax cliff coming. Like it could be,
it would seem to me that the biggest issue in 2025 is the tax issue.
Yeah.
And if Trump is the president, it's saving that legacy of tax reform, which I think was the greatest legislative accomplishment of his presidency. So if I'm advising him, I'm saying, no, let's put a lot of this to bed as much as we can, because the tax bills are going to be most important. And if we have a small majority in the House and we have a full Senate majority, we can get a lot more done.
Well, and that's what happened when
we came in.
When Trump came in.
Oh yeah.
And they pushed all the CR into January, February, and we're going, you guys can't move on to your priorities. You're still dealing with last year, last fiscal year.
Yeah, you don't
get it done so you can laser focus on House, Senate, and White House on the issues that really matter.
Well, you're going to have confirmations. You're going to have there's going to be a lot happening that's going to be contentious from the beginning. That you're going to have to, clear the decks a little bit. You're going to have a ton of executive orders that are going to be happening. So it's the legislative calendar needs to be shortened.
So it seems to me that like Schumer, for example, who has to understand that his role as majority leader is short-lived. Because,
The math. It is math.
It's a 50-50 guaranteed.
Yep.
At worst for Republicans. So if Trump wins, that's the majority. Or so we win West Virginia, so we only have to win one of Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Montana, Nevada.
Arizona.
We're not going to win Arizona.
Not gonna win
unless Lamb is the nominee.
That's still a stretch.
Yeah. So
anything could happen.
The question is, what is Schumer's end game for the end of the year? How do we get in his head and figure out, okay, so if he thinks if he believes that there's a chance he's not going to be the majority leader, what does he want to have done before?
Don't you think he's going to go noms because he can't get anything big through the judicial noms? Try to get as many judicial noms through as possible, because they kind of slowed up on that quite a bit.
So there'd be a big sprint.
That's what I think, because you can't get anything that he would see as a win through the House unless it's some big bipartisan bill.
Yeah, the challenge too is if Republicans hold the House, win the Senate, win the presidency, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Republicans to punt into Q1. It just will be. Like, why are you cutting a deal with Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden when you have a full Republican? This is just the challenge, right? Is that they're going to have that. And so if it's some other mixture, like we win the Senate, keep the House even maybe, but you lose the presidency, like that's a potentially different outcome. But I think the other interesting sort of conversation, this town, for various reasons, has sort of baked in that the Democrats are going to win the House. Like that's been for a while. It's starting to change. That's starting to change a little bit. And partly because the Republicans have had such a rough go of it in the 118th Congress that they're kind of like, why would,
just a little bit.
why would the voters give them another round of this, right? But I think
again, the clicks and coin caucus.
Well, and I don't think there's ever been an election where a party flipped the White House, but then the House flipped the other way.
Right.
Right. Trump wins. He's going to carry the House forward. Yeah. And, you look at the polling, which is maybe better than it's ever been in Trump's entire 8 years. Like, I don't remember him ever being up in a poll in 2016.
He wasn't.
Right. And
he wasn't in 2020.
Right. And so, he's up in all these state polls. He's up in the national polls. Now, that could certainly ebb and flow, right? These are snapshots in time. But let's just say he wins the popular vote. according to some official counts, he lost the popular vote by 4.5 points in 22. Like, what does that do to all these seats that are like Biden 3, 4, 5 seats? I mean, even my old district, right? So I represented a suburban district in Kansas that had a Democrat before me, a Democrat after me, the only Republican represented in 25 years, and it's under the Cook rating, it's a Biden +4. I think it's an R+1, right? So R+1 meaning if Trump wins the national vote by half a point, that means it's a 1.5 point there theoretically, which means suddenly races that may not be on the on everyone's radar, you start carrying people into Congress. So you could see one of those, and that kind of happened in our year too.
Yeah.
Where there were races that no one was even tracking, where longtime Democratic incumbents got wiped out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so it could really be on election night a
yeah.
Republican wave.
Well, and that's why Trump is being so bullish on areas where he thinks he can just make a play. Does a big rally in New Jersey. Look what happened there.
Does anybody know if those states that passed the National Popular Vote Acts, do they have a trigger mechanism? So, like, if Trump did win the National Popular Vote, does California's electoral votes go?
That's a great question.
I don't know if they have
because this
triggering
could really
mechanism.
be coming back to bite us,
Yeah,
right?
I think some of them had the triggering mechanisms, like in certain number of states, like a majority of states, but I don't know if some of them didn't. That would be hilarious.
That would be wild.
That would be karma.
Yeah.
in many ways.
You just think about this from a landslide perspective, in that we have won the popular vote once since the Bush Quayle ticket in '88. Think about that, one time in 2004. All those years went at one time. If Trump were to win the popular vote, I just think we've been holding the House and Senate while basically getting creamed on these national races. What does that do to be the rising tide?
Yeah,
it could be a landslide kind of night. And if you get 6, 7 Senate seats, pick up dozens of House seats, I mean, that would be the real surprise story, is that people are expecting, okay, Trump might win, these things might be close, but if it could be a blowout if he wins the popular vote, in my opinion.
If he wins the popular vote, I mean, wow, that could be very.
No one's been talking about that.
Because
So
he could win the
question.
popular vote, and it could still be close on the Electoral College. I mean, it could be a type of where
But he lost the popular vote and had a decent Electoral College win in 2016, right?
Yes.
But if he does better in California and better in New York,
It depends where he's doing better, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily across the board. And look, this could be a scenario where, because of RFK's impact on that it doesn't down ballot him as well. Like, where are the RFK votes going on races for Congress? Where are they going for races for the Senate? And it could be a case where these, it's in certain segments of the voters. I also wonder if, one of the areas where Biden's performing poorly, right, is with younger voters and, minority voters. I think the Biden's hope on all that is they come home come November. Like, they're expressing dissatisfaction now. But ultimately, where does Trump pick up his gains? I would like to hope that it's partly from the suburbs. Right. Just love to get seats like mine back, Maricopa County, those types of areas. We'd like to see that start to come back a little bit. And is that impacted by the VP selection? Is it impacted by, Biden just being incapable of serving just from an age standpoint?
Well,
is it the border? Is it inflation? Where are those pressure points going to hit?
I think it's all the above.
Yeah,
right
I
now.
think
Those
it's
are all
the
in play.
above. Because one of the things I've said in a previous episode is that if you voted for Trump in 2016 and then you voted for Biden in 2020, the chances of you voting for Biden again
you're coming
are
home.
very, very small. Because he went completely opposite of what he ran on. So if you voted up because you're voting for the adult in the room, or you're voting for some stability in the country,
You're voting for this idea that he's this moderate, right?
Yeah, I mean,
He's going to
And then he says, I'm the
govern
next best thing
moderately.
since LBJ.
Right. and then all of a sudden he governs, completely left. I mean, just the whole thing is just a disaster,
Becomes the master of disaster.
as Tim Scott said,
Byron Donalds.
or Byron Donalds. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
master of disaster. Repeat
so-
that several times.
So those guys come home. Then you tack on, people who have never voted for him before who are now giving him a look, and it's like,
And you also have a more disciplined campaign, right?
You do.
We've had in any of the
Yes.
other
100%.
right? More disciplined
got
campaign.
real people.
We're back to supporting advanced voting. Right?
Yep.
We're back to
Yes.
being okay. That we've shot ourselves in the foot on that in 2020.
Completely.
Right. So we're
That's
back
why.
to
That's one of the reasons why Arizona turned out the way it did. In some ways, it was a disaster on
it's a
election day.
self-inflicted
and-
wound
yeah,
to tell your
completely.
voters not
And
to
there
vote
was
early. You're just gonna
Hundreds
get
of thousands
slippage.
of ballots that weren't returned on the Republican side.
So you got that coming, and you have a sense from them that, particularly the folks in the orbit that believe the election was truly stolen. Trump has this great catchphrase, right? He goes to rallies and he says, "We need to win so big, too big to rig."
Right.
Right. And it's like turnout. Like they didn't talk about turnout in previous years as much, right? They were like, don't vote early. You know, it will win anyway. And so now it's like we need such a massive win. That just creates a culture of every vote matters.
Yep.
Right. And that to me is a different way to look at the race.
It's a
and
totally
who's
different.
been instrumental in that is his daughter-in-law, is my understanding. Getting him turned in that direction.
Interesting. Well, I like the too big to rig catchphrase. I think that's
big
got
to
a
rig.
nice ring to it.
Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of him winning the popular vote. I mean, it just totally changes the whole dynamic. It would be
Right.
such a shock to the system. At least, I mean, I have not heard,
This town would lose its noodle.
I have
Right.
not heard anybody talk about that.
I think that's the real surprise story of the night. And then what does that mean for governing? Because this whole basis of the Trump, phenomenon in the Republican Party is populism. And if that sort of turns into an actual popular vote win, it sort of confirms to that faction of the party that's moving that direction that this is the future. Right. And it sort of creates, what does that do to policy next year? And we speak for can you see him? We speak for the majority of this country. We won the popular vote. Right. Now, RFK is going to have a drain on that. And that might mean it's 48% or whatever it is. But, I just think that might change how he carries himself too in the next cycle.
I don't disagree with
Well,
that.
plus, if you have big majorities in the House and the Senate,
Right.
then you
Here's
can
what-
get a lot more things passed.
Well, and here's one other nuance I think that will be different in that, assuming that were to all happen, and if that doesn't, we'll delete this.
We'll delete the podcast.
We'll delete the podcast.
We're not good at making predictions. So
Yeah, so this will probably come all back to haunt me. But in 2017, when the Trump team won, I think it's kind of widely known that even they were surprised, right, that they won that election,
yes,
right? And so there wasn't the preparation that they want, right? And so now, it's been widely publicized that they've got, AFPI and different groups that are preparing for day one to have people
Heritage
in place.
has a massive-
Heritage has their Heritage
2025.
25.
Yeah,
So
2025.
that's totally night and day from 2016. And I think one of the things that will be very different is that in 2017, the policy came from Congress. So like Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that's Paul Ryan's baby.
Yeah.
Kevin Brady, right? The healthcare policy that was coming from Congress, right? A lot of that stuff was coming to him. President was signing, or we couldn't get the healthcare bill there. But I think the opposite will be true now, and this is fully Trump's party. It's not a surprise. And if he would win the popular vote and carry the House with him, I just feel like that policy is going to start in the White House and be fed to Congress.
Yeah.
and
versus
he's
the
going to
other
have
way.
really competent people in the White House pushing it, and people that we know. I would imagine
Good. We like
that
to hear that.
we agree with.
Yeah.
on most of it, which would be nice.
This is a
Versus what we're in
fascinating
now.
look. This is a fascinating look. Now, I think that is a scenario that is possible if Biden is on the ballot.
So we're back to that.
Yeah.
We're back to that.
But who knows?
But if
I
Biden
think,
is
Ben,
not-
you're
but see,
right that the 27th is a telltale.
But if not Biden, but to your point, we're losing Biden. That for that to happen, the window is closing.
Windows closing, and they have and this is why I kind of throw cold water on that a little bit as a Democratic solution, in that the vice president would have to get the nomination, and she performs worse. Probably
Yeah, I mean, that would
in
be a
November,
dream for us,
right?
is it?
And so that's a dream for us. And if she doesn't get the nomination, and they steal
And
it
then
from
there's a
her
civil war.
with a white male governor from California or something, that's not going to really.
Well,
work.
his prediction
Mine
is
is
Michelle
the
Obama.
only person.
that
who
is
can
the one that
yeah,
keeps
it's the
running.
only one that can leapfrog Kamala legitimately, in the sense of quell the outrage.
So
be
does
And
Obama-
don't they have a mechanism to do that with the superdelegates?
Well, would he have the?
Which
are
is
they
a
even,
very odd-
Are they even involved? Right. I don't know how
Yeah,
much the Obamas are.
I think they're running the
I don't
government.
Think, I don't think she wants it. I mean, I don't.
No,
know
I don't think she.
Yeah.
I mean, as I've
All my
said,
Democratic friends say that exact same
I've-
thing. They're like, she does not want to be president.
and I've said
Okay,
she's a
well.
no until she's a yes.
Which is what Ted Cruz says.
Is that right?
That is what he has been
Well, he must be
touting.
listening.
He's listening to our show.
Yeah.
Stealing our good stuff.
What else do we need to know, man?
Yeah.
You've told us a lot. This has been fascinating. This is
I don't know. I mean, well, wait. Trump always underperforms in national polls. And now that he's like 1 point up, even on state polls, I mean,
Yeah.
against Biden in 16, he was nationally down like 6 or 7 for most of the time. Then he
In
lost
20, yeah.
I mean, 20, sorry.
Yeah, well, and he was down to Hillary in 16.
was down
I mean, you
big
point out.
to
I
Hillary.
mean, this is something that's important to understand, is that him being up in any poll is different than his previous 2 runs.
Right.
So,
And it's easy to dismiss national polls because they're actually not that useful in some ways. But every state, swing state poll has been dramatic, and some of them up 6, 7, 8
yeah,
points.
Nevada.
They can't-
And the
it's
more
not
the more they prosecute him, the higher his poll numbers go.
Well,
This indictment was a perfect example of that. This conviction, and now they're telling Biden to back off of calling him a convicted felon because the polling is really negative.
I haven't seen that.
Oh yeah, they're saying we need to back off of this. We need to be more measured about this. Well, first of all, your son is now a convicted felon too, and because the polling is people are seeing through what this conviction is all about, and it's completely going.
Well, the thing
negative for us.
that I thought,
and plus they've raised $200
the
million.
the
Yeah.
the fundraising part of it is, and that goes back to your comment about a professional organization. They just had a huge injection of cash, which is going to be effectively
Right.
used because they've got Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita and smart people.
and that was a
there.
Biden advantage, the cash.
Right.
That's
Yes.
what
And
the
now it's
Democrats were
gone.
saying.
The
right.
two
And now it's
advantages they had was the money and the media on Biden's side. And now the money thing is equal. They still have the media, but
But the media's starting to crack. To your point,
and the money gives Trump the ability now to communicate directly to the independents, undecided voters. So, he's now got more campaign effort.
The other thing I think is interesting to go back to the down ballot races for a second is, in 2016, for example, Hillary Clinton won my district by 1 point. And then we won by say 11 or 12 points. So we exceeded Trump on the ballot by a dozen points.
Wow.
And we saw that in races across the country where we had Hillary Clinton districts and the members were exceeding Trump, particularly in moderate areas, suburban areas. Now you flip to this year, and a lot of our key Senate races and things, the candidates are trailing Trump in these key races.
Right.
Right. And people used to talk about Trump as like, well, he's going to be on the ballot. He's going to bring us down. That was out there. And now in some of these Senate races, it's like if our candidates could just be where Trump is on the ballot. And so you have this.
and it just shows the lawfare is completely backfired.
Well, and it just has this
So
interesting
much.
thing. Like you take you have these Democrats in some of these states where you have Trump voters who are only Trump voters, or actually Democrats or independents who lean left, but they're voting for Trump.
Right.
But it's not necessarily transcending to down
But
ballot.
doesn't that also, if that occurs, and say, let's take Pennsylvania as an example.
Right, that's one of them,
Say
yeah.
if Trump wins there by 3 and McCormick loses, but they still win the House and the Senate, that shows you even more that it's Trump's party and it's the populist wing. Because
100%.
you're like, these normal Republicans who you guys wanted, they can't win and people won't vote for him. But Trump wins majority in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Well, pie in the sky stuff, guys. I mean, one can only hope. And
I'm telling you, well, you heard it here first.
I don't think from a policy perspective, Biden is going to back off on anything that he's doing. I don't think from a legal lawfare perspective, and you both probably know this better than I do, that they're going to go for broke.
Well, they're trying on immigration.
And if they jail him, which is a possibility, we disagree on this. I think the judge is going to send him to jail
I don't know.
to make a point, because I think they're telegraphing that. Then it's going to be a watershed moment for the Republicans. I think exactly what you're saying will take place, because the people will see through it, and you're going to have Democrats, independents vote for Trump in droves.
Yeah.
I mean, just my gut feeling,
and
because
on
they'll see right through it.
on your position on Biden doubling down, it's been interesting, their efforts in recent months and weeks to try to change the subject on immigration, right? They know that is his biggest policy vulnerability. And it's just so laughable because they spent 3.5 years doing, nothing and, getting rid of the Trump policies, remain in Mexico and all those things. And now they have the executive
Things that
order.
were working.
Now they have this executive order that's come out. And it's like,
That's going to be
guys,
challenged
how
in
are
the courts.
How are you just doing this in June?
Yeah.
of the election year. Like if you really wanted to go ahead and do that, why wouldn't you do it like a year ago?
Yeah.
Yes.
And pivot on these things? Are you just waking up to the fact that the polling's bad? Like, I'm just surprised at his political advice that it's okay now to start pivoting to the center,
Because-
like
because-
in the 11th hour.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point of our previous guest, former Senator Jim DeMint, because these are progressive Democrats who believe in these policies. They actually want to implement these policies across the country, and so therefore they're not going to back off if they don't feel that they have to.
Well, to do all that and then at the 11th hour to try to readopt some of Trump's policies, it's like, what voter are they going to get with that?
Well,
'Cause
that's
they're gonna
the border thing
It's
just
not
is
going to
a
affect
mystery.
anything on the ground.
I mean, because I know that he telegraphed this for months, which was purposely to, and Eric Erickson deserves credit on pointing this out, let the hardcore leftist progressive groups get organized for the lawsuits to prevent it from actually taking place. So he does the executive orders on the border. Literally the same day got sued with a very
By the ACLU. Right?
with a very well prepared lawsuit, which was ready.
Ready.
And so it's trying to show. I don't know, like you said, I don't know exactly who he thinks he's selling, but it's all just show because he knows that it's not actually.
Well, and he has problems in his base, so it's not without risk.
Yeah.
It's not like you can say, well, I know the base is with me. Let's go flip on immigration policy. He already has plenty of young progressive problems, so I don't know how.
On the Israel front.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So-
a little bit.
That's
Now that's an interesting one because I wonder if they get a peace deal, does that throw him a little bit of a lifeline with the slippage he has with younger voters, or is that so people going to give him any at this point? People are so mad about that they're not coming back.
Well, I think that the anti-American sentiment amongst that hardcore radical left component of the Democrat Party is not going to go away. That they
But who
will.
are they voting for in November?
Well, that's a good question.
I don't think they vote.
They may not vote.
But if he gets
They
a
might not
peace
vote.
deal and they get scared of Trump, is that a Biden sort of hope that they can get those core voters back on their team?
Yeah, I don't think they get a peace deal anytime
Doesn't
soon.
look
well,
like it.
that-
Right.
but they
Israel's not
but
gonna
it-
give them
But does
one.
that give him something?
But
right?
it could give. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll tell you who the peace deal would actually affect is liberal Democrat Jews.
Yes.
They'll be like, oh, okay, well, we can.
come home
We're
now.
okay. I don't know if there's anything. If he's ever, it's hard to know. Like Michigan is a great example of like,
Right.
okay, so that's a large Arab population. What's going to actually happen? I think it's probably they just don't vote for him, and they don't vote for anybody. They either leave it blank or they
Or
vote
they've
third
got-
party.
They've got
or,
RFK. They've got
RFK
outlets.
or Jill Stein. I mean, Jill
Or-
Stein
or
and
he's
Cornel West have both been very
that's a good point.
pro-Palestine.
Yeah. Or he's misreading the entire Michigan issue. It's not really the Arabs. It's the blue collar workers who are losing their jobs.
No, or the combination.
Yeah, it's economy.
And they're going to vote for Trump.
You know what I've been shocked by on the economy is that the sort of exasperated frustration of the White House that people don't understand how good the economy is. Do you know what I mean? They're just like, but don't you see how good you have it? And they're like, no, we're mad about it. And they're like, did you read?
Not when we're paying.
Did you read the unemployment rate? I think you guys are reading this all wrong. They're like, I'm the human who's paying more for stuff. Like it's not
Yeah.
you. This inflation thing, assuming the prediction about what could happen in November comes true, we had earlier. I mean, the inflation is a real story here.
Exactly.
Look back in time. They mocked it. They called it transitory.
Yeah.
First of all, they threw every amount of kerosene you could throw on it. Like
It
the
was
last
insane.
bill they did was
Every
like
single one.
Right.
And they
I mean,
wanted $4 trillion
they
instead of the
right.
$2 trillion that they got.
they ignored it. They mocked it. They dismissed it, and then it started showing up. And
they blew it up.
And they blew it up. And then it's in the polling. But I just don't understand why they don't get that the inflation. They're like, but the economy is good. Why don't you people get that? Like
It is. I mean, I think it must just be that they're buying their own bullshit
Yeah.
and they're living in a bubble where they
Right.
don't recognize that people are really hurting.
Right. Well, Biden keeps saying that inflation was 9.9% or whatever when he came into office, when it was like 1.7.
Right.
Yeah. But I think you're right. I think they buy their own.
It's lower than
BS.
it was, but it's still over 3%. Like,
Well,
right.
cumulative, it's over 20%.
Yeah,
Right. And
40% in
and
some
that feeling's
sectors.
not going away.
No.
Well, that's the thing is that if there's a downtick in inflation, that doesn't mean that prices are going
right.
down.
They keep trying to spin it like that.
Yeah,
Like inflation's going down. It's like,
Yeah, we're not in a
my-
deflationary period right
the
now.
number one value meal is still
that's
like
the-
15
the
bucks.
economy
That's
is
what
not
I'm
more
talking about.
I was
productive.
talking to a Democrat congressperson about that, and he's like, well, like you're saying, the economy's doing really great. I was like, I took 3 of my kids to McDonald's. It was over $50.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? I go, yeah, you guys don't shop like at McDonald's. I know that. But like that hits real people.
So here's a constituency of the progressive left that maybe that they'll listen to this year when it completely falls off the face of the planet. That's Hollywood. Right now, no one's going to movies. Movies are down 20 to 30% in terms of attendance. Why? Because it costs $100 just to go to a movie.
Yeah,
these days. Families are not going, and the product that they're producing, that's another podcast all by itself. But that constituency, that is a loyal Democratic constituency, is going to be in the tank this year because
What's entertainment costs, right? Those
because
budgets are
inflation.
tight.
Yeah. I mean,
That's all inflation.
I know this because I yesterday bought the tickets for us to go watch Inside Out 2.
Yes,
And it was with a thing of popcorn.
for Father's Day, right?
Yeah, for a thing of popcorn. I mean, I think I did the 4 tickets. I did the popcorn, candy, soda combo, and it was $83
Yeah,
for us to go watch that movie.
you
for
have,
4 people.
For 4 people.
and the industry right now, year over year, is down 20 to 30%. And it has you can say you can look at the product, but it's really like, why would I go? And then you can look at their strategy too. Why would I go to the movie theater, pay $100 cumulatively for my kids, for myself, when I can wait another 4 weeks and it'll be streaming online and I can just stay home.
AMC is in my old congressional district.
Yeah.
The headquarters there. I know I know the CEO there and good folks, but they've been struggling. They've been doing everything they can to just keep their head above water. It's been a tough time, I think, in the movie industry.
Yeah. So it's, when you're talking to your progressive Democrat elected, say, look what's happening in the movie industry. That's your core constituency. They're dying.
Wouldn't Biden be better served just to own it and say he's doing everything to fix it
Yes.
as opposed to dismiss it?
I think that
Well, you would think.
Right? Hey,
Yeah.
we spent a lot of money to try to resuscitate the economy. We overshot it a bit, but it was because of good reason. We were trying to help people in a time of need. That supercharged the economy. Plus, we had a supply chain issue, and we're on it nonstop, 24 hours
Is
around
all
the
I'm
clock.
doing every
That's all
day
I'm
is
doing is
to-
focus
yeah.
on
Then
that, right?
Bill Clinton, I feel your pain.
And I feel your pain,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Instead of like, you don't feel pain.
yeah,
That's like
there's no pain to feel.
There's no pain to
We have
feel.
the best economy in the world.
I'll make you feel pain, Jack.
Right, yeah.
Rather than fighting it, just accept it and own it and move on. But that would be an antithesis of what Washington's all about.
Well,
Don't
it's
own it.
antithetical to Joe Biden.
Yes, yes, of course.
That's the core.
Well,
Guys,
thank you
thank
guys
you
so
for
much
being
for
here.
being
Yeah,
here.
thanks.
Thanks for your insights. Thanks for leading us down a road that can only be described as maybe fantasy land.
Primrose path
But
there.
you know what? I'll go there with you.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, to be at this point in our country's history, seeing everything that we're seeing with this president and the possibilities that we might have with the reelection of Trump, which we never thought would be possible. You guys, your insights and your service, both of you, to the country as former congressmen, we really appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for
We
having
appreciate
us.
your families, and hey, we'll see you in Austin.
See you in Austin.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening.
guys.
God bless.